This is Ray Grant. It's Monday, November 13th, 2023. It is 6:53 a.m. here in Pittsburgh. I was going to do a break off the videos about the canonical crimes and talk about the Zodiac Project itself. I was preparing that video and I realized it was going to take me a while to do some printouts so that I could hold them up and show people what I was talking about, which kind of defeats the purpose of just doing like a very basic video like this. So I decided before too many days went by without putting a video out that I would perhaps finish the videos about the canonical crimes. So I'm going to do Lake Berryessa this morning, and maybe I'll do Presidio Heights next. I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to do, or maybe I'll do a video on some other topic uh, that's not directly related to what I'm talking about now. But anyway, let's talk about Lake Berryessa. The Zodiac killer attacked a couple in the Lake Berryessa area in Napa on Saturday, September 27th, 1969. And he confronted a couple that was residing by the lake. He had the female victim Cecilia Shepard tie up the male victim Brian Hartnell. Then he tied the female victim up, and he went over and retied Brian Hartnell's uh, uh, the clothesline cord around Brian Hartnell's hands and feet. After they were both hogtied, he had been holding them at bay with a 45 caliber automatic, and then he put that back in its holster, and he pulled a double-edged knife out and proceeded to stab Brian 7 times in the back, and then he stabbed Cecilia Shepard 10 times in the back. He had after stabbing them both 17 times, he then stood up. He walked up the hill to where their car was, which was about 500 yards away, and he wrote a message on their car door, essentially recounting the murder events in Vallejo, and he wrote on the passenger side car door of Brian Hartnell's white Carmen Gia, and then left. The two victims were who had been stabbed were essentially waiting to be rescued. Brian was able to, I believe, get up on the highway. Somehow they were able to flag help down, but the help didn't arrive for about an hour, in which time Cecilia Shepard had lost enough blood that she died on Monday, September 29th, 1969. I'm going to talk about the attack itself, just a few aspects of the attack, which I think are significant. The first of which is, if it's been suggested by a minority of posters on Zodiac Killer message boards, but it's been suggested that the Lake Berryessa attack was done by a copycat. Okay, which is there. I've seen a lot of ridiculous suggestions on Zodiac Killer message boards. That's basically what those forums exist for. It's for people to come up with ridiculous ideas and post them. Um, the Here's the thing: on September 27th, 1969, the Zodiac killer had been highly publicized. He had sent a cipher to 3 newspapers in the Bay Area. That was a big story. The investigation of the murders was fairly in speculation about the murders and who the Zodiac killer was, and he had called himself the Zodiac in a letter sent mailed in early August. We don't know exactly. Excuse me. We don't know exactly when the letter was, the date the letter was mailed, because we don't have the envelope. I'm assuming that what happened early on in the Zodiac investigation, the letter with the "This is the Zodiac speaking," the envelope with "This is the Zodiac speaking" letter was sent to the San Francisco Examiner. And what I'm assuming happened is that there was some process at the Examiner whereby the letters in the envelopes were separated, and somehow the envelope got trashed and was never recovered. And as a result of that, if you look, for example, at the letters on Tom Voigt's website, you will notice that there is no envelope option for the "This is the Zodiac the first "This is the Zodiac speaking" letter, and that's because no one knows where it is. I don't think the police have been keeping it secret all these years. I think what happened inadvertently is that in the original processing of the letter, the envelope got sent to the garbage, and nowadays shredders were not commonly used back in the 1960s. They're very common now, obviously. So I can't say that the envelope was shredded, but somehow the envelope was mislaid or was put in the garbage or what have you, and it's apparently not recoverable, which is significant because there are things that were on the envelope which would be of interest right now. But be that as it may, the only crimes that the Zodiac killer had been connected to were the 2 murder events in Vallejo, and both of those were Lover's Lane shootings, where either the killer, apparently forced the victims out of their car at Lake Herman Road, or simply walked up to their car at Blue Rock Springs Park and started shooting. Okay. There was nothing remotely similar to what happened at Lake Berryessa, other than the fact that he approached a couple and ended up physically attacking them and killing the female. Okay, so people kind of jumped all over the fact that once again the female died, but there were other reasons why that happened. It doesn't necessarily mean that the killer was obsessed with first killing the female and less so than the male. But the important thing to realize is that Lake Berryessa could hardly be if you're trying to commit a copycat crime. You don't go somewhere and put on this after 2 drive-by shootings in Lover's Lanes. You don't suddenly show up with an elaborate hood on in the afternoon, not at night. The 2 Vallejo crime events were committed at night. You don't show up in the afternoon with this elaborate hood on and have the victims tied up first, and then I don't see where that can be considered a copycat crime. Okay, I think clearly it was a crime by the original Zodiac. Most people think that way. The other issue about the Lake Berryessa murder is that perhaps the reason people like the copycat posters have questioned it is that it was not claimed in the letters. But as I said earlier in my videos, that's the whole point of the Zodiac murders, which is when the Zodiac's intent was to commit conventional murders, commit a co-ed murder, commit drive-by or hit whatever, however you want to characterize them, a drive-by or a hit and run, a lover's lane murders, a cabbie murder. The point of doing that is that if something went wrong in the commission of the murder, such that, for example, on Lake Herman Road, if Stella Medeiros or James Owen had actually seen more than one killer in the at the crime scene as they drove past, the Zodiacs then had the option of not claiming that crime. Okay, so you could go to the trouble of committing a crime, and then saying, this is not going to end up looking like a sad little man who's running around, running amok in the area and committing murders. So we just won't acknowledge that crime, and that's the whole point of the Mikado letter, the "I Have a Little List" song, patter song, is that they had a list of murders, they had a list of possible victims whom they could target. And even after they had killed some of those victims, they still had the option of whether or not to actually claim those crimes. And they would have been able to do that. I'm not sure I don't know whether they committed crimes that they subsequently chose not to claim or not. I do know, by the way, that none of the letters claims a crime that they didn't commit. Okay, although that's a myth that is all over the Zodiac message boards, and you see people on the Zodiac Killer subreddit claiming it, that the Zodiac committed lots of crimes that he claimed a lot of crimes that he didn't commit. No, he didn't. Give me an example. The comment about killing the man with the 38 in the Mount Diablo letter was simply correcting the gun caliber at Presidio Heights. It had nothing to do with the Richard Raditich murder. Same thing with the Blue Meanie that's mentioned in the April 20th, 1970 letter. The Zodiac says, "I hope you don't think that I'm the one who committed who killed committed the murder at the cop station." If these people were right and he's claiming all kinds of murders that he didn't commit, why would he deny doing that? Okay, it doesn't make any sense. There isn't an example. This is one of few times when Mike Butterfield and I agree on something, which is that there is not an actual example anywhere in the letters where he claims a crime that he didn't commit. Okay, so the question then becomes, if he was claiming if they were creating a narrative where they're claiming crimes that for example don't show that there's more than one killer, where the two Vallejo murders don't, as far as what people actually saw, although William Crow and Stan, the 14-year-old, originally saw multiple people inside the Chevy Impalas, okay? And the ballistics in the Lake Herman Road turnout suggest pretty much specify that there was more than one killer. Same thing in Riverside with two people going into the library after to take books out. But the point was, if there was something that went wrong during a specific murder which did not allow them to create this narrative of this single killer going around, the essentially the typical serial killer narrative, then they just wouldn't claim that crime. So that's basically the reason for committing conventional crimes, other than the Lake Berryessa murder. In the Lake Berryessa murder, for all intents and purposes, the Zodiac killer is wearing a neon sign saying, I am the Zodiac killer. Okay. And he before he approaches the couple, he puts the very elaborate costume on that has the crosshairs on the bib of the headgear, um, and the ultimately he will reiterate the Vallejo murders on Brian's car door. So there was no doubt that the Lake Berryessa murder, the Lake Berryessa attack, was done by the Zodiac killer, so that there wouldn't be any need to write to the newspapers and claim that murder, because it's obvious, and it has been obvious now for whatever it's been now, 54 years, that's the vast majority of people who follow the case believe that the Lake Berryessa murder was committed by the Zodiac killer. That you can't say that about any of the other canonical murders. If the Presidio Heights murder was never assumed to be a Zodiac killer murder until the letter was sent on October 13th claiming the murder. Okay, so one of the things that this does is it points up the fact that it demonstrates what their operational idea was, which is we are going to commit conventional murders, which gives us the the opportunity to either claim those murders or not claim them, depending on whether the murder we managed to pull off the murder the way we want to or not. Okay, so that the Lake Berryessa murder is a demonstration that this is the one's signature murder, which they don't even need to claim. So they never did. They never come out in any of the letters and say, or make any kind of a reference, because, as I said, you had actually three things. You had a Zodiac hood, you had the car door message, plus you had the phone call to from the Napa car wash to the I want to say Napa Sheriff's Office, Napa Police Department. So you had three things that basically tied that murder to the Zodiac killer. Okay, and you didn't need to write about the murder to the newspapers. Essentially, that's what the Zodiac killers were pointing out one of the things they were pointing out when they committed the Lake Berryessa murder was that there is this ability, if you're committing conventional murders, and something goes wrong, not to claim the murder. Obviously, they had to claim. They didn't openly claim the Lake Berryessa murder because it was obvious that it was committed by the Zodiac killer. So essentially what you have is you have two kinds of murders, okay? You have the conventional murders they're committing, which they can claim or choose to claim afterwards or not claim, and you have the Lake Berryessa murder, which is special. It's a murder where it is obvious that the Zodiac killer committed the murder. And that's one of the reasons why we need to take a very close look at what happened at Lake Berryessa. One of the things that's been in dispute about Lake Berryessa is how many times the victims were actually stabbed. And this has been an issue. The great Mike Butterfield has disputed this over the years. Okay, and I don't think there's very much of a dispute about it. After the Zodiac killer got the two victims down on the ground and had them hogtied, he then stabbed Brian 7 times in the back And then he went over to Cecilia and stabbed her 10 times, I believe 5 times in the front and 5 times in the back, although she was moving around as he was stabbing her, so that's a little bit difficult to determine. But what happened afterwards, when Brian Hartnell, who is very groggy in the immediate aftermath of the attack for several days, said that he had been stabbed 6 times. And if you look at this is the Zodiac speaking documentary, what Brian actually says is, I was stabbed, I think, 6 times. Okay. Now, I don't know how often how many times you've ever taken a close look at your own back. Okay. But Brian obviously was not in a position to know, at the time he would have been in a very high stress situation. He would not have been in a position to know exactly how many times he was stabbed. I can understand why he wouldn't remember how many times he was stabbed. When the Napa Register newspaper did a story on the attack on Monday, what the paper actually says is, and the paper gets the victims backward. The paper says that Brian Hartnell was stabbed about 10 times, and Cecilia Shepard was stabbed about 7 times. Now, those are the numbers clearly that were given to the beat reporter at the Napa Register by the hospital. Some hospital spokesman or a doctor, they were asked how many times they were stabbed, and they got the victims backward. It was Brian who was stabbed 7 times, and it was Cecilia who was stabbed 10 times, okay? But allowing for that fact, the two numbers that the hospital gave to the beat reporter were 7 and 10, okay? So I am inclined to believe what the hospital says and not so much what the groggy victim says, okay? Obviously, none of us has exact photographic evidence or video of how many times the Brian Hartnell was stabbed, okay? But I am more likely to believe what the hospital says. Gareth Penn, who I believe to be a conspirator in the Zodiac project, says that Brian Hartnell was stabbed 7 times. That's good enough for me. So I believe Brian was stabbed 7 times. Cecilia was stabbed 10 times. And that, again, is what the newspaper in the immediate aftermath of the attack said. It was 7 times and 10 times, although they got the victims mixed up. Okay, so and sometimes it just comes down to what people are willing to believe or not, and what fits their bias. Okay, I'm not trying to present any sort of biased viewpoint. I have openly admitted, for example, that the Mount Diablo radian isn't an exact radian. I've suggested reasons for that. Okay, I do believe that Brian was stabbed 7 times for the simple reason that Brian played dead, going by his own account, and he was lying face down, and the killer was stabbing him in the back. Okay, which brings up another point, if I may paraphrase Dave Varanchek here, which is, did the Zodiac killer intend to kill the victims? Okay, I believe the answer to that is no. And the reason for that is that he had Brian dead to rights. I mean, Brian was lying down and the killer was stabbing him in the back, and Brian wasn't moving, and yet the killer managed to avoid stabbing Brian in any lethal areas, okay? Brian was able to recover from his wounds. He's still alive as far as I know. And so that here's the problem. If you go to the trouble of creating this very elaborate hood prior to launching the attack at Lake Berryessa, where The crosshairs symbol isn't even painted on or anything like that. It's actually sewn, and the entire hood looks like a medieval executioner's garb. Okay, if he kills both the victims, nobody ever sees that. Okay, so he's gone to all this trouble for nothing. Okay, so that's one reason to believe that he at the very least didn't intend to kill both victims. Um, what I would say about Cecilia Shepard is that if Cecilia Shepard had simply lain on the ground, as Brian Hartnell did, and allowed the killer to stab her in the back, maybe turn her over and stab her in the front as well, but she would not have been stabbed in any fatal areas. She would have. I believe she might be alive today. The two reasons that Cecilia Shepard died on Monday, September 29th, 1969, were number one, she moved around under the blades of the killer, and he was not actually trying. He was trying to avoid uh, uh, making a fatal blow. That's the number one thing. Even with that, the main reason that Cecilia Shepard died is that it took an hour for help to arrive, and she lost too much blood, and she had been stabbed, and unfortunately, in areas where she was bleeding internally, and she ended up dying on Monday. As I said, if Cecilia Shepard doesn't move around under the knife and help arrives sooner, she would have survived. So that Lake Berryessa was not intended to be a fatal attack. It was intended to be more of a, I don't know how you would characterize it, a ceremonial event which entailed some bloodletting. And unfortunately, because of the way Cecilia reacted, it turned into something else, which is, as I said, which is too bad. The other the other thing about the murders in Lake Berryessa is that when after the killer, well, first of all, uh, the Brian was stabbed 7 times, then Cecilia was stabbed 10 times. Okay, how long does this take? If you watch the movie, if you watch the David Fincher movie, you will notice that the two attacks together barely take a minute. Okay, if that, maybe it's more like 45 seconds. He goes up to Brian and he's bump 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 bump. Then he goes over to Cecilia, and unfortunately, she starts moving around. One of the comments that has been made about the Zodiac killer at Lake Berryessa is that he was breathing hard and he seemed to be like emotionally involved, especially in when he was stabbing Cecilia, and that this somehow indicates some sort of frenzy on his part. I don't think that's true. I think what happened was his intent was not to kill, in other words, to inflict 10 wounds, but not to thereby kill her. And the problem was Cecilia was moving around under the knife, and it was very difficult for him. And he was doing a kind of ceremonial stabbing for at least some of the stabbings, where he was lifting the knife above his head and then coming down like this. And you would think that somebody who is intent on killing his victims wouldn't have that much of a problem doing that with a double-edged knife and with two victims who are hogtied. Okay, the problem is, as I said, Cecilia was moving around under the knife, and it's kind of like pro wrestling, which is in pro wrestling, this is something that is also referred to. If you ever watch the movie Spartacus with Kirk Douglas and Woody Strode, where they go to fight each other. They're gladiators and they have to fight each other in the Roman Colosseum. And the Woody Strode's character says, you know, if we give them a good fight, they'll give us like a thumbs up and neither of us will have to die. Okay. Unfortunately, it's very difficult to fake that. And if you watch the movie, as they're doing it, the crowd kind of catches on that they're trying to avoid killing each other, and the crowd starts demanding that they actually fight. And then Woody Strode says, "Okay, I guess now we're going to have to really fight to the death because we haven't been able to fake it." Okay, so essentially, if you're watching pro wrestling, if you're watching the WWE, which my brother does all the time, and what they're trying to do is they're trying to. It's like there used to be a tag team. My favorite wrestlers of all time were Demolition, which was a tag team from the early 1990s, and it was Bill Eadie and Brian Darso. And Bill Eadie was actually from the area south of Pittsburgh. He's from Brownsville, PA. And Bill Eadie said, you know, one of the problems with the Powers of Pain is they had this guy. I think he was I think it was. I want to. Well, I want to say it was the Road Warrior. I forget the name of the Powers of Pain had this big guy. Okay, who was like super strong. And Bill Eadie says, you know, the problem with the Powers of Pain is what you're trying to do on a wrestling show is you're trying to inflict blows that look really bad but don't hurt. Okay, and the Warlord did the opposite of that. The stuff that he didn't look particularly nasty, but it hurt like hell. Okay. So essentially, that's what the Zodiac Killer is trying to do at Lake Berryessa, which is he is trying to look like he is actually trying to kill the couple and at the same time avoid any fatal areas. So that was not a problem with Brian because Brian was playing dead, but it was a major problem with Cecilia. And I imagine that it took a great deal of struggle on the part of Michael O'Hare when he's struggling with Cecilia Shepard. He's trying to hold her down with one hand and stab her in a non-lethal area on her body. And it's very difficult. And again, he has to look like he's actually trying to kill them while he's trying to avoid killing them. Okay. So it's essentially the same principle. And so what was interpreted by some people when he's talking to Brian Hartnell early on, and you can go to, I think, Tom's website, he has the dialogue between Brian Hartnell, what Brian Hartnell remembered of the dialogue with the Zodiac Killer. He's very cool, calm, and collected, okay? It isn't until he's struggling with Cecilia that he looks like he's in a frenzy. I don't think he was ever in a frenzy. I think it was just tremendously difficult to look like you're trying to inflict fatal wounds. And in the meantime, because the victim is struggling, it's just very hard to do. It's like most professional wrestlers will tell you, and stuntmen will tell you, is that bad things tend to happen because that people don't react exactly the way you're expecting them to, and you end up doing something that you don't mean to do. Obviously, there have been multiple cases of firearms deaths in movies, which I'm sure were not intended. And you have to ask yourself, how does this happen? How do actual firearms go off on a movie set? I haven't figured that one out yet. Okay, but it's the same idea, which is the Zodiac Killer was trying not to kill them. not to kill anybody. And unfortunately, he ended up killing. It's ironic because at Blue Rock Springs Park, he was doing everything he possibly could to kill Michael Magoo. And the problem is Magoo was just able to dodge and jump into the back seat and get out of the way, so that when the Michael O'Hare hits bullet number 9 and fires that, Magoo's still alive and he can't fire another bullet because he is the design of the murder was such that he could only fire 9 bullets. So he had, well, I'm sure that's what was in his clip. I'm sure 9 bullets is what he had inside the gun. So the irony is he was trying everything that he possibly could to kill Michael Magoo, so that both of the Vallejo crimes feature 2 dead victims. But Magoo manages to avoid being killed. Cecilia Shepard, who I think is probably a lot brighter person than Michael Magoo, unfortunately, does the one thing that ends up killing her, which is to struggle against the attack. If she had just played dead or just lain there and let the killer stab her, I believe she would have survived, or she might have survived. Now, what complicates that is the fact that it did take over an hour for help to arrive. So, but Brian survived. So anyway, the next question about Lake Berryessa is the killer stands up. Oh, here's something else that doesn't make any sense about Lake Berryessa. If you believe that the Zodiac killer is an actual serial killer, okay? I was just talking about Blue Rock Springs Park, and at Blue Rock Springs Park, he's already thrust the gun into the car. We know he fired at least 2 shots. Well, he fired 2 shots. We know exactly he fired exactly 2 shots with the gun thrust into the car. So clearly, he was doing everything he could to kill Michael Magoo. Okay, but he manages not to do it. What happened at Lake Berryessa? As I started to say before, if you watch the David Fincher movie, you're looking at the attack on Brian takes just a matter of seconds. It's boom, 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 boom. The attack on Cecilia Shepard takes maybe a little bit longer because he stabbed her 10 times instead of 7 times. And she's, trying to move out of the way. But again, if you watch the movie, you will note that the attack hardly takes any time at all. It takes less than the entire attack itself, the stabbing, takes less than a minute. Okay. No one was going to interrupt the killer while he was stabbing the victims. Okay. He could have gone on stabbing the victims until his arms fell off. Okay. And I'm sure he would not have been interrupted. They were not anywhere near help. There was no one out, boating out on the lake. So how is it that the killer stops after 17 stabs? Okay. He stabs Brian 7 times, gets up, stabs Cecilia 10 times, walks over to Cecilia, stabs her 10 times, stands up, and leaves. He's gone to this tremendous amount of trouble of fashioning the hood and having them tied up, having her tie him up. By the way, that's another reference to earlier crimes when he has Cecilia tie Brian Hartnell up, which apparently is also what happened in the Domingos Edwards murders, which I will talk about. I may talk about if I remember it shortly. Okay, but the whole point being, he goes to this tremendous amount of trouble with the hood, with the tying up, with the talking to Brian, putting his .45 away, pulling out his double-bladed knife. You would think that he would stab each of the victims 100 times, and even that wouldn't take a tremendous amount of time. He stops after 17 stabs. He straightens up. He walks 500 yards to Brian's car and writes what he writes on the passenger door. How is this consistent with a serial killer? How is this consistent with someone who is intent upon killing his victims? The intent at Lake Berryessa wasn't to kill the victims. The intent was to stab two victims 7 times and 10 times. Okay, that's what the point was. It didn't have anything to do with killing anybody. It was creating an attack, as I said before, which is consistent with what will eventually be in the cipher format of Z340, which is you had to have 20 times 20 gunshots and 17 stab wounds. That adds up to 37. That gives you me 37 SFPD 0, okay? Because he struck 37 times and the police weren't able to do anything about it. So the killer stands up. He does not keep any of the money or the car keys. He walks 500 yards from the crime scene, and somehow he knows which car is Brian Hartnell's. Okay, isn't that unusual? I mean, isn't that how does he know which car is Brian's? There were literally hundreds of people in the park that Saturday evening, and the car was parked 500 yards away from where the attack took place. But somehow he knows. First of all, as he's looking around, he originally goes down one hillside and sees I think a dentist and his son. Now, some people say, well, the son had a gun with him. Okay. I believe that if Brian had been brandishing a gun, he probably would not have been attacked. The Zodiac killer, Michael O'Hare, would have said, "Oops, okay, well, we can't attack them today. We can't commit a crime today because I don't want to get shot." Okay, so yeah, I don't think, however, that the intent was to attack anyone who was there. I think the intent was to attack Brian and Cecilia. And the Zodiac killer knew which car was theirs. Okay, could have been anybody's car. They could have been dropped off by a friend and just walked down to the beach, and then so that they were picked up later. Well, I think it's unlikely that they would have walked to the park because that's a pretty big area. But I mean, they could have gotten to the park some way other than through Brian's Carmen Gia. But the Zodiac killer knows who they are, and he knows which car is theirs. And he writes on the passenger car door the information about the Vallejo crime scenes. So the next question we have to ask ourselves is, why is the Zodiac killer, knowing who Brian and Cecilia are, why is that significant? Well, it's significant because Brian was a student at Pacific Union College. Cecilia which is a Seventh-day Adventist university. Same thing with Cecilia Shepard. Cecilia Shepard was in the process of transferring. It's one of the reasons that they were together that day is she was in the process of transferring from Pacific Union to UC Riverside, and she was going to pursue, music degree. So, but Brian and Cecilia were Seventh-day Adventists. Now, how typical is that in the area? In the general area where they were, according to my relatively perfunctory research, I'll admit, but what you would get, there were a lot of there were a fair number of there were more Seventh-day Adventists than you will see like in a lot of other areas of the country in that general area. So it's something like, if I'm not wrong, and other researchers can correct me on this, but the chances of any one given person being a Seventh-day Adventist was maybe 1 in 16. I think there were maybe like 6% of the population, something like that. Okay, but Brian and Cecilia were both Seventh-day Adventists. And Renee Modlin, who is the medical examiner in Riverside, he's the man who did the autopsy on Cherry Bates, was also a Seventh-day Adventist, and um, got his medical degree from a Seventh-day Adventist college. Okay, so why is that significant? It's significant because Cherry Joe Bates, okay, had a name inside her own name. I was talking about the significance of people's names. Um, the name Cherry Josephine Bates contains the name Joseph Bates, okay? Also, Cherry's father, who is the recipient of one of the three loose leaf notes, which were not sent by the 2016 hoaxer. They were sent by the original Zodiacs. I will address that issue in another video at some point. But the Joseph Bates was the recipient of one of the three loose leaf notes. So why is the name Joseph Bates significant? It's significant because the founder of the Seventh-day Adventist Church is a man named Joseph Bates. You can either Google Seventh-day Adventists or you can Google Joseph Bates. It's up to you. You can go in either direction. How likely is it that that was just a coincidence that the first victim happens to be the founder of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and then the first victim has a name inside her own name, which is the name of the founder of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and whenever 3 years later, not quite 3 years later, he attacks two Seventh-day Adventists. Okay, I don't think it's coincidence, and the reason I don't think it's a coincidence is the Zodiac killer makes a phone call to the Oakland Police Department at 2 a.m. October 22nd, 1969, and says that he will call the Channel 7 TV show if Channel 7 is able to get either F. Lee Bailey or Melvin Belli. Now I've spoken to Melvin Belli myself already, so I can attest to the characterization in the movie is being spot on. That's basically the way Melvin Belli was. But anyway, this happens on October 22nd, 1969. The Melvin Belli shows up at Channel 7. They do a call-in show, and I believe the first hour there are no phone calls. And then after the first hour, unfortunately, Eric Weil, who was the same guy who interrupted a Bob Dylan interview and I think was a resident of a mental hospital, ends up calling the show and calls himself Sam and goes on. And unfortunately, he wasn't the Zodiac, but he kind of was very opportunistic and ended up being on the show. And a lot of people thought that was the Zodiac killer. If you look at the Zodiac killers, at Dave Aranchek's deciphering of Z340, what you will see is, and the phrase that jumps out at Dave, okay, and I give Dave all the credit in the world, although I don't think that's the actual solution to Z340. I give Dave all the credit in the world for the amount of work that he did, and he did find some, I think, some significant things. But the phrase that absolutely jumps out at Dave when he's doing the deciphering is where the plain text, suddenly he gets a plain text that says, "That wasn't me on the TV show." Okay? What does that mean? Well, I think most of us, myself, Tom Voigt, Mike Morford, most of the people who have been around the Zodiac killer case for any length of time, a significant length of time, will tell you that we never thought that the voice on the voice on the show was the Zodiac's. We believed it to be Eric Wiles. And the people, Nancy Slover and Brian Hartnell, who were brought in to listen to the voice, said it wasn't the same as the one they heard. So, but what the phrase in the Dave Aranchek solution tells us is, when he says that wasn't me on the TV show, it means he never intended to call the TV show. In other words, on October 22nd at 2 a.m. in a call to the Oakland Police Department, the Zodiac killer set up a TV call-in, which was intended to basically be dead air. Okay, in other words, he never intended to call the show. An hour or so went by until, or maybe more than that, went by until Eric Weil actually did call the show. But if it had been up to the Zodiac killer, there wouldn't have been a phone call that day. Why is that significant? It's significant because in the Adventist Church on October 22nd, 1844, the second coming was supposed to happen. There was a man by the name of William Miller, who is the original founder of the Adventists. And he said that the second coming was going to happen on October 22nd, 1844. So the entire church, and it's one of the most amazing events in history, because in religious history, because the entire congregation, everybody in Adventist church expected the world to come to an end on October 22nd, 1844. And obviously it didn't, or maybe it did, I don't know. But the event is generally called the Great Disappointment. And what happened was William Miller's credibility went like this, okay? Or, he ceased to be a credible figure, and a lot of people left his church. That's one of the most amazing things. Usually religions are kind of immune to that sort of thing, but not in this case. After the Great Disappointment, a major fraction, I think maybe most of the original Adventists left the church. And what ended up happening was Joseph Bates and some other people created this new version of the Adventist church, which was the Seventh-day Adventists. They celebrate Sunday they celebrate the Sabbath on a Saturday, the same way Jewish people do. And so, for example, I was talking about the word Easter being inside the names of Darlene Ferrin and David Faraday. Seventh-day Adventists don't celebrate Easter Sunday, okay? Because they don't celebrate the Sabbath on a Sunday, okay? So there's some allowance for Easter in their observations, but they don't have an Easter Sunday in the same sense that most Christians do, okay? So the Channel 7 show on October 22nd, 1969 was intended to be another example of a great disappointment, okay, by the Zodiac killer. It's a demonstration that the significance of the Adventist Church and the Seventh-day Adventists and the attack on Brian and Cecilia and the murder of Cherry Bates and the what could easily have been anticipated, which is the autopsy of a Seventh-day Adventist, Renee Modlin, of Cherry Bates. All of those things were connected, okay? And they all, again, had to do with what the general idea of the Zodiac Project was, okay? So that was the point of the attack. And as I said, the attack in September was then connected to the phone call that was made on October 22nd, and then was referred to in the plain text of Z340. So all of those things are in play, and they're all part of the general design of the Zodiac killer. So basically, what you had at Lake Berryessa was And by the way, that's also why the attack itself is ceremonial. Well, there are two reasons the attack is ceremonial. One is that it's an acknowledgement of the significance of the Adventist idea of the great disappointment that I just talked about, but also because as I've said elsewhere, I said in the comments section of one of my videos, which is Michael O'Hare was he was born January 22nd, 1943. On September 27th, 1969, he was exactly 9,745 days old. The significance of the number 9745 is that it represents in binary to Morse the phrase times 17. And what we have in the Zodiac ciphers, for example, in the attack at Lake Berryessa and elsewhere in the Zodiac project is we have the idea of times 17 or a 17 multiple. Z408, which was mailed to 3 different newspapers on July 31st, 1969, consisted of 3 segments of a 408 character cipher. Okay, one was sent to Vallejo Times-Herald, one was sent to San Francisco Examiner, one was sent to the San Francisco Chronicle. But Z408, when you put the 3 segments together, what you got was a 408 character cipher. Well, each of the segments was 8 times 17. And the entire Z408 cipher was 24 rows times 17 columns, okay? Same thing with Z340 on November 8th, 1969. It is 20 rows. I don't have the shirt on today, but it is, have to wash it sooner or later, you know. But it's 20 rows times 17 columns. How many times did he strike at Lake Berryessa? 17 times. Okay. I believe that the significance of the 17, one of the significances of the number 17 to Michael O'Hare is that the zip code for his birth was binary 17. I'm going to tell a tale out of school here, which is Ray Grant was born in New York City. I was born on Sunday, April 29th, 1951. I was born at 329 West 29th Street in Manhattan, okay? And that's the address of the French hospital, which was a very large maternity hospital in Manhattan. And I'm assuming they did other things besides obstetrics, but that enough people were born in the French hospital. For example, there were 7 children in my family, and the first 5 were all born in the French hospital. I was number 4, and my 2 older brothers, older sister, and one of my younger brothers was born in the French hospital. The French hospital is now called the French Apartments. It actually has 2 addresses. It's 330 West 30th Street. One side of the building is. The other side of the building is 329 West 29th Street in Manhattan. But the significance as far as the zip code is that the zip code for the French hospital, and as I said, the French hospital was a busy enough maternity hospital that there used to be message boards where people would say, oh yeah, I was born at the French hospital in 1954 and all my family members were born there. And, you know, so, I mean, there were literally thousands and thousands, probably tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people were born there, but certainly tens of thousands were. So that the zip code of the French hospital, currently the French Apartments, is New York, 10001. Okay, that's binary 17. So I don't know if Michael O'Hare was born in the French hospital on January 22nd, 1943, but if he was born in that zip code, it's binary 17. So it's some sort of connection like that. If you're asking my belief, since I know Michael O'Hare was born in New York City, I think that's what it was. I think the zip code of his birth, whether it was in the French hospital or not, was binary 17, and that's what the significance of it is in the Zodiac project. Okay. Anyway, so what we have in at Lake Berryessa was this kind of ceremonial event, which was designed to uh, point up things, point up the fact that all of the other murders that they were going to commit were going to be conventional. They were going to look like your average murder. Um, Also, the significance of the Seventh Day Adventist angle, and also to the significance um, of the numbers, and Michael O'Hare being exactly 9,745 days old on that date, and that's essentially what they were celebrating. So anyway, that's the logic of the Lake Berryessa attack. There are other things that can be talked about involving that attack. There are a few other angles dealing with it, but those are the main ones. Those are the intent of the attack and of the murder, which obviously when they went to a tremendous amount of trouble to do, and all sorts of things could have gone wrong during the commission. It's almost the opposite of the Paul Stein murder, which was well, I mean, things did go wrong in the Paul Stein murder too, but not with the murder itself. The All sorts of things could have gone wrong with the Lake Berryessa murder, and it's possible that Brian Hartnell could have done away with all future like Zodiac videos like this one and so forth if he had just like tried to attack the Zodiac as he considered doing, and he was talked out of it by Cecilia. But anyway, the purpose of Lake Berryessa was what I just talked about. I will be. I think that's what I want to talk about today. And if I think of something else, I will mention it in a later in a later video. Um, my next video will probably be on Presidio Heights, and it'll be similar. If people have any questions or comments that they would like to address to me, they can mention them in the comments section below. And as always, I appreciate people taking the time to watch these videos. They are not high tech, but as I said, I'm hoping that the Zodiac Project video I'll have like some show and tell, and I'll have some demonstrations of what I'm talking about. In this case, in the case of this type of video, I may include those like somewhere in the comments section. But anyway, thanks to everyone for watching this video. I'm a little pressed for time this morning, but I will try and upload another video. Maybe I'm considering. Ned told me that this is Monday morning. Ned told me that on Tuesday he's putting out a Mike Morford video, and he's waiting until Friday to put out my video. So let's see, today's the 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th. So I will be apparently uploaded on Ned's channel on Friday, November 17th. And Mike Morford will be Tuesday, November 14th. So I'm looking forward to seeing Morph again and seeing what he has to say. And there will also be, without going into detail here, because I'm not sure exactly when it's going to happen. There will also be a couple of interesting videos apparently uploaded either on, I believe, on the Zodiac Experts channel, which we were trying to arrange over the weekend. So I'm not sure when exactly that's going to happen, but I'm looking forward to that because you'll get to see a couple more videos which have already been recorded with Ned, which were, I believe, recorded about a year ago. So those have, I think, have been recovered, and my hope is that they're going to be put up in the not too distant future, and I will be talking more about that when the time comes. As I said, I thank everybody for watching this video, and I will talk to you soon.